Our lab in this case consists of laying out for a 3-tread winder stair. I have my shop drawings or my details drawn up, and you can refer to those for how to start your layout. And what we want to do first is we want to establish this inside corner of our stair. Normally, that inside corner will be defined already by the framing that's in place when you go to install your stair. On a winder stair, you will want to install these 3 successive platforms before you do the lower stringer and before you do the upper stringer. So this will be the first part of a winder stair that you build in place. As we do the individual platforms for our 3 treads, we'll start with the base platform, which is going to be essentially a dogleg shaped platform, starting from this point here, okay, which translates to this point, and we'll draw the dog leg and then over and around. So we'll have a kind of an L-shaped base platform that will start our construction. From there, we'll install a second platform, which will have this first angled tread, which is this angle. And then we'll have our third angled tread, which will be this one up here. And then on top of this platform, we would then build our upper stringer. So let's start by establishing this inside corner on our layout sheet. This is just a sheet of MDF, any scrap plywood will do. And I'm going to use 39 inches from the outside wall to my inside corner. That's kind of the minimum size that we would want to have for our stairwell for a standard code compliant stair. So I'll pull 39 over this way, 39 from this edge to establish my inside corner, and then from there I can proceed to lay out my pie-shaped risers. I've got my drywall square, and I can simply just use my drywall square to locate 39 inches. 39 inches is there. And the nice thing about a drywall square is you can simply line it up, it squares itself. And draw a line, and I'll draw a little bit darker right there. I'll take my square, and again, finding 39 from the far edge, 39 inches right there. So this will be the inside corner that way. And again, as long as your piece of plywood it has square edges, you can simply set your drywall square in the end and establish your line there. So this line we don't necessarily want to see, because that will not be part of our layout, but this inside corner will be. Now referring back to our drawings, we'll start at the inside corner, and what I want to lay out first is the position of the tread nosing. Our platforms are actually going to be set back from the edge of the nosing by some distance, and that distance will vary. But we first want to lay out the nosings of the tread. So the nosings of the tread are as listed on your drawings here. So from the inside corner, we want to go 4 1/4 inches to the edge of our first nosing here, and also 4 1/4 on this leg as well. I'll take my tape measure, and I'm going to burn 10 inches. So I'm going to put the inside corner at the mark of the 10, and then just come down to 4 1/4 and make a mark, like so. And same way, same thing, going in this direction, coming down 4 1/4, there, like that. So I have my 4 1/4 and 4 1/4 marks. Now this 6 inches, we may not have quite enough room, not quite. So we'll have to just approximate that dimension. This one over here, we can mark that 6 as well. Again, I can either start at my 10 and come forward to 16, so that'd be my 6-inch mark there. That would be the front of the perfectly square nosing of this first tread that would go on the upper stringer. So this is my 6-inch mark. I can just make a note there, 6, 4 1/4, and 6 inches to that one. I'm going to square up a line at this mark. That'll be this line. And mark that line. Okay, so that represents the edge of the nose of my first tread on the upper stringer. And then this point here is the edge of the tread, and I'll have to establish that angle. What I do want to mark, however, is just a reference line through that 4 1/4. And I'll mark it kind of light so that I can just barely see it there. It doesn't have to be dark because ultimately it's just a reference line that we'll erase later. So I just marked it very lightly there. And on my drawing, you'll see I've made a note as far as the angle of that nosing. In this case, it's got a 24-inch distance this way and a 13 7/8 distance this way. That is the angle of 30 degrees or 60 degrees, depending on which position you start at 0. So if this is 0, this is 30, this is 60, this is 90. So it's 30-degree increment treads. If I put my framing square on this line, starting from there, and just match it up to my line that I've drawn, I can simply use my square to mark 13 7/8 there and there, so that I have a point right there that I'm going to travel through from this point through that point and continuing on. That will establish my 60-degree line and also represents the front edge of this tread. So I'll grab a long straight edge and I'll mark that line out. So starting at my inside corner 4 1/4 mark, and then through that point there, like that. And there is, mark that a little bit thicker. That will be the nose of this tread. I'll perform somewhat the same operation on this edge. I'm going to draw a line parallel to here. If you don't have a drywall square, you may just need to replicate this distance parallel along that edge, and then use a straight edge to mark your reference line here. Again, I'm just going to draw this somewhat lightly because it's just a reference line. Put my framing square on my line, match up the end to my inside corner, so I know this distance is 24, and again, I'm going to come up 13 7/8. Make sure you're using the outside numbers, not the inside numbers. So 13 7/8. It's right there. Be aware that some framing squares don't necessarily mark 1/16 of an inch. This one on this side of the square is marking 1/12 of an inch. So just be aware of that. You may just need to verify that dimension by flipping over your square and making sure that it lands on the 7/8 mark, which is right here. And again, I can use my straight edge to mark those 2 points through. One being right here, together over there. All right. So at some point over here, I have the leading edge of my lower platform, or of my lower tread. Here I have the front nose, or the leading edge of my second riser, second tread, third, and then the first tread of the uphill. So I have my space divided into thirds. Now what we want to do is offset each of these lines by the thickness of the tread overhang and the thickness of the riser. The overhang and the riser are going to vary from job to job. You may need to ask the architect or the supervisor what that dimension or what those dimensions should be. For this example, for this mock-up, we're going to assume a 3/4 inch thick finished riser and a 3/4 inch nosing overhang. If we add those two numbers together, we'll get 1.5 inches. That 1.5 inches is where we're going to offset the lines that we have marked here to find our platform dimension, or our platform shape. So I'm going to take my tape measure and offset each of these lines parallel by 1.5 inches. So I'll just mark that there. Same thing over here. When you're doing this, try and make it as square. Make sure your tape is as square to that line as you can make it, like that. And then we'll mark that line. I'm going to make a note that that is my platform edge, and this is my tread nosing right there. I'll do the same to this one. Inch and a half. Inch and a half. And mark my line. Platform edge. Tread nosing. And another one over here. This one I can actually use my drywall square. It should give me a nice parallel line. And keep in mind, if this is our tread, this platform edge is technically the unfinished or the sub-riser board for this set of stringers. What I want to do is I want to give myself a place to land my upper set of stringers. So from this point back, I want to measure 10 inches back to allow space for the heel of my upper stringer to sit. So I'll take my tape measure and come back 10 inches. going to be the platform, the base platform. This will be that back edge of the base platform. So this here is extra. We wouldn't necessarily build our platform any bigger than that dimension. For this dimension, I'm going to remember I was short 6 inches, but since we're pulling back 1.5 inches, I will have enough room for this one. I'll set my tape there. So 6 inches would be out here, but then if I come back 1.5 inches, that puts me at 14.5 inches or 4.5 inches this way. So this will be the edge of my platform down here. So I can mark that line. Again, if you don't have a square, you can simply measure the distance from that edge. I've got 1.25 inches or so. So I can just match that 1.25 inches down here. And I'll use my straight edge to mark my line. Okay, so this is my platform edge. So now looking at this on the whole, I have 3 platform shapes. All of the platforms end right here, and they all stack on top of each other. So all 3 platforms, this back corner is right here. The first platform that I'll build will be an L shape, and it will basically follow this profile to here, around, square, and then all the way to here, and then back. That will form my first platform. I'll cut out my plywood subtop. I'll cut framing member that I'll rip down to some dimension, so that once I sandwich my subtop, or my subfloor technically, and my ripped down 2x material, I'll have a unit rise. On the first platform, you can probably just leave the full 2x. It's not necessary to rip that one down. The second platform, you'll notice I've written my platform edge. That will define the shape of my second platform. This front line following the inside corner, the same as the lower platform, around and back. That one we do want to rip the 2x framing to the proper height so that we net 1 unit rise. And then we repeat the process for the third platform. That angled, that 60-degree angle. We build that platform the same process as this one to get our third one. That should leave us ample space to then set our upper set of stringers, like so. The reason we don't come to a tight corner on the inside is for the purposes of meeting the code. Code says that the distance this way across here needs to be a minimum of 6 inches, which is why we also have that same 6 inches here and the same 6 inches here. Okay, that's our minimum tread depth. Also, the walk line, which is typically 12 inches in, okay, or 12 inches from the inside of the path of the stair, at 12 inches needs to be at least a 10-inch tread depth, which this layout method will guarantee. If your corner is larger than 39 inches, that's fine. We start at the same inside corner, but we just go out further. We extend these lines out further. One thing to check is that the distance from the corner to your nosing should be the same, within about 1/8 of an inch. So remember, my tread nosing is here. I have about 20 3/4. And this one is about 20 7/8. So that is acceptable. Within 1/8 of an inch of being equal is what we're after. Also, the dimension from nosing to nosing, here to here, 28.5 there, should match this distance as well, 28 and a little more than 1/2. So again, about 1/8 of an inch tolerance there. That is the layout for a winder stair. Refer to the pictures that I have as far as how to assemble it. And as I said, we always start with the L-shaped platform, which does not have the angles, it just has the L-shaped platform. We'll build and frame that, get that mounted to the proper height. Then we'll build a second platform, this shape, okay, with that small jug there, and then we'll build a third platform to there. That is essentially the process for a winder quarter turn stair. Fairly simple once you understand the technique and the layout that's involved, and it's really all about the layout.